adapt to it, throw away all the worthwhile things, the love and beauty and peace that we once had in our lives. Those men can get somewhere. They can turn this life into a climbing game, waiting their chance to get a little farther toward the top, a little closer to some semblance of security." "Everybody adapts to it," Sabo snapped. "They have to. You don't see me moving for anything else, do you? I'm for me, and believe me, I know it. I don't give a hang for you or Loomis or anyone else alive. Just me. I want to stay alive, that's all. You're a dreamer, Brownie. But until you pull something like this, you can learn to stop dreaming if you want to." "No, no, you're wrong. Oh, you're horribly wrong, Johnny. Some of us can't adapt. We haven't got what it takes, or else we have something else in us that won't let us go along. And right there, we're beat before we start. There's no place for us now, and there never will be." He looked up at the mate's impassive face. "We're in a life where we don't belong, impounded into a senseless, never-ending series of fights and skirmishes and long, lonely waits, feeding this insane urge of the government to expand, out to the planets, to the stars, farther and farther, bigger and bigger. We've got to go, seeking newer and greater worlds to conquer, with nothing to conquer with them, and nothing to conquer them for. There's life somewhere else in our solar system, so it must be sought out and conquered, no matter what or where it is. We live in a world of iron and fear, and there was no place for me and others like me, until this ship came." Sable looked at him strangely. "So, I was right. I read it on your face when we were searching the ship. I knew what you were thinking." His face darkened angrily. "You couldn't get away with it, Brownie. Where could you go? What could you expect to find? You're talking death, Brownie, nothing else. No, no, listen, Johnny." Brownie leaned closer, his eyes bright and intent on the man's heavy face. "The captain has to take our word for it until he sees the ship. Even then, he couldn't tell for sure. I'm the only drive engineer on the station. We have the charts. We could work with them, try to find out where the ship came from. I already have an idea of how the drive is operated. Another look, and I could make it work. Think of it, Johnny. What difference does it make where we went, or what we found? You're a misfit, too. You know that. This coarseness and bitterness is a shell. If you could only see it, a sham. You don't really believe in this world we're in. Who cares where, if only we could go, get away? Oh, it's a chance, the wildest freak chance, but we could make it." "If only to get away from him," said Sabo in a muted voice. "Lord, how I hate him. I've seen smallness and ambition before, pettiness and treachery, plenty of it. But that man is our whole world knotted up in one little ball. I don't think I get home without killing him, just to stop that voice from talking, just to see fear cross his face one time. But if we took the ship, it would break him for good." A new light appeared in the big man's eyes. "He'd be through, Brownie. Washed up." "And we'd be free." Sabo's eyes were sharp. "What about the acceleration? It killed those that came in the ship." "But they were so frail, so weak. Light brittle bones and soft jelly. Our bodies are stronger. We could stand it." Sabo sat for a long time, staring at Brownie. His mind was suddenly confused by the scope of the idea, racing in myriad twirling fantasies, parading before his eyes the long, bitter, frustrating years, the hopelessness of his own life, the dull, aching feeling he felt deep in his stomach and bones each time he set back down on Earth to join the teeming throngs of hungry people. He thought of the rows of drab apartments, the thin faces, the hollow, hunted eyes of the people he had seen. He knew that that was why he was a soldier. Because soldiers ate well, they had time to sleep, they were never allowed long hours to think, and wonder, and grow dull and empty. But he knew his life had been barren, the life of a mindless automaton, moving from place to place, never thinking, never daring to think or speak, hoping only to work without pain each day, and sleep without nightmares. And then he thought of the nights in his childhood, when he had lain awake, sweating with fear as the airship screamed across the dark sky above, bound he never knew where. And then, hearing in the far distance the booming explosion, he had played that horrible little game with himself, seeing how high he could count before he heard the weary, plodding footsteps of the people on the road, moving on to another place. He had known, even as a little boy, that the only safe place was in those bombers, that the place for survival was in the striking armies, and his life had followed the hard-learned pattern, twisting him into the cynical mold of the mercenary soldier, dulling the quick and clever mind, driving into him the ways and responses of order and obey, stripping him of his heritage of love and humanity. Others less thoughtful had been happier. They had succeeded in forgetting the life they had known before. They had been able to learn easily and well the lessons of the repudiation of the rights of men which had crept like a blight through the world. But Sabo too was a misfit, wrenched into a mold he could not fit. He had sensed it vaguely, never really knowing when or how he had built the shell of toughness and cynicism, but also sensing vaguely that it was built, and that in it he could hide, somehow, and laugh at himself and his leaders and the whole world through which he plodded. He had laughed, but there had been long nights in the narrow darkness of spaceship bunks, when his mind pounded at the shell, screaming out in nightmare, and he had wondered if he had really lost his mind. His gray eyes narrowed as he looked at Brownie, and he felt his heart pounding in his chest, pounding with a fury that he could no longer deny. "It would have to be fast," he said softly. "Like lightning, tonight, tomorrow, very soon." "Oh yes, I know that. But we can do it." "Yes," said Sabo, with a hard, bitter glint in his eyes. "Maybe we can." The preparation was tense. For the first time in his life, Sabo knew the meaning of real fear, felt the clinging aura of sudden death in every glance, every word of the men around him. It seemed incredible that the captain didn't notice the brief exchanges with the little engineer, or his own sudden appearances and disappearances about the station. But the captain sat in his cabin with angry eyes, snapping answers without even looking up. Still, Sabo knew that the seeds of suspicion lay planted in his mind, ready to burst forth with awful violence at any slight provocation. As he worked, the escape assumed greater and greater proportions in Sabo's mind. He knew, with increasing urgency and daring, that nothing must stop him. The ship was there, the only bridge away from a life he could no longer endure, and his determination blinded him to caution. Primarily, he pondered over the charts, while Brownie, growing hourly more nervous, poured his heart into a study of his notes and sketches. A second look at the engines was essential. The excuse he concocted for returning to the ship was recklessly slender, and Sabo spent a grueling 5 minutes dissuading the captain from accompanying him. But the captain's eyes were dull, and he walked his cabin, sunk in a gloomy, remorseful trance. The hours passed, and the men saw, in despair, that more precious, dangerous hours would be necessary before the flight could be attempted. And then, abruptly, Sabo got the call to the captain's cabin. He found the old man at his desk, regarding him with cold eyes, and his heart sank. The captain motioned him to a seat, and then sat back, lighting a cigar with painful slowness. "I want you to tell me," he said in a lifeless voice, "exactly